Welcome back everyone, and in today's video lesson we are going to look at parallel motion. So if you recall, parallel motion is basically going to mean that we're going to have the same direction. So we have two different voices and they're both going up or they're both going down simultaneously, and they're going to do that by the same distance. And that's a really important key part to what parallel motion is. And this means that our interval size is going to stay the same. So our interval size stays the same. And this is going to be equivalent to doing something like, let's say, unisons would be an example. We could also consider octaves. And we could even consider things like perfect fourths and perfect fifths. And I'm going to put these starred because there's just a little bit of fixing that has to be done in order to get that to work correctly. Now you might even say, well, hey, could we do something like, could I do a major third, or could I harmonize by a minor sixth? And the answer is yes. Using parallel motion, you could do this, but just know that if you do, you are definitely going to step outside the bounds of traditional music theory. And as long as you're aware of that and you're okay with that, then that's fine. So let's look at an example. In this example, we have our melody here. We're going to call that V1, meaning voice 1. And let's assume that this is going up, C, D, E, F, G, A, B. And we're going to consider first V2. So V2 is going to be unisons or octaves. And recall that anything that's going to be a unison or octave is going to be the same pitch class. And so this is what this would look like. It's just harmonizing by the same note, just a different version of that note, a higher or a lower version of that note. For now, we're going to assume that we're going up, which is why I put V2 on top of V1. Now we're going to look at V3 here. And remember, we're still going up, right? So we're going, whatever C is, we're going above the melody, so higher, just for the example now. So for perfect fourths, that's going to be an F. Your D would be a G, okay? And then to harmonize the E, we would have A, and here this would be a B flat. All right, we'll come back to that. Then C, D, and E. So this is what I meant by we have to finagle it a little bit. Like up here, I mentioned, for example, could we do perfect fourths? And I said yes, but it requires some fixing. And if we look over here, we can clearly see that this B flat is not in the C major scale. It's supposed to be a B. So it means that we're just sort of stepping outside the C major scale. You could also look at this as harmonizing the C major scale here. You could look at this as the C major scale as being harmonized by the F major scale. So C major and F major scale. So that's kind of a neat thing. Now, what if we did perfect fifths? All right, so same idea here. We're going to have G, because G is 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. It's the fifth degree of our melody in the C major scale. And using perfect fifths, we'd have a G, then we would have A, then B, C, D, E, and F sharp. And once again, you kind of get the idea that, well, hold on, F sharp didn't belong here, so to speak, but that's because we're not doing similar motion where we're changing our harmony to match the melody. What we're trying to do here is we're getting the exact same distance. And C to G is the same distance as D to A, which is the same distance as E to B, which is the same distance as F to C, same distance, and same distance. And that is the concept of constantly using perfect fifths. So once again, we could look at these two and we could really consider this is sort of harmonizing C with G, right? So we'd have basically saying C major, and then F major is what we're using to harmonize it with, or C major and G major. Now, again, talking about those fixes, if you go, well, gosh, that's going to sound funny, right? It's going to sound awkward or weird, or maybe that note doesn't sound right. Well, then you can just eliminate that, which is what a lot of people do. They just skip over that scale degree altogether. They ignore it, they avoid it, and then you're perfectly fine to work around it. And it makes it a little bit more ambiguous, but maybe that's what you're going for. All right, so now let's look at an example where we do something a little more interesting, which is what if we did major thirds the entire time? In major thirds, if I were to take my C note and harmonize by a major third, it's 1, 2, 3. So I'm going to be using an E note here. Then the major third of a D note is F sharp. Then it would be G sharp. And then this would be A. This would be B, C sharp, and this would be D sharp. And what you can see is we are just completely off the reservation here, right? This is way off. This is not anywhere near what we were originally doing. So when we start getting into something like this, talking about major thirds, you can see this is, in a sense, it's kind of becoming quote unquote a disaster for traditional music theory. Again, if this is what you're going for, this is great, and there's a purpose and a function for all that. But if you don't know what you're doing, you're going to run into problems like this where you are just way off the scale. Our initial melody was in the key of C major, and you can see here that this is in the key of just flop, right? This is not what we were looking for. It's 4 sharp. So the point is it's not in the same key. All right, so let's look at the major 7th example. And we're going to see the same kind of idea here. So harmonizing a C note, and I should draw these in up here. It's a terrible squiggle there, but the point is that we're looking at the melody as compared to all these other elements. So right, it's always melody to this, melody to that, melody to this, melody to that. That's kind of what we're getting at with this. So where I'm not comparing, for example, these two, that's not what I'm doing, or these two, I'm not doing that. We're always starting off here with our base melody and comparing something else. All right, so B, and then moving on, we would have, well, what would be the 7th degree for the D major scale, and it would be a C sharp. And you could consider the same thing for all of the other scales that are written down here, right? G major, the 7th degree for G major would be F sharp. The 7th degree of A major would give you G sharp. And the 7th degree for B major is going to give you A sharp. And once again, we're way off from our intended concept. If we were looking to build something in a kind of a normal stereotypical key, right? I just want to keep it in the key of C major, then this is way off. This is not what I was looking for at all. So this is one of the reasons why we tend to think of parallel motion as, in a sense, kind of boring or maybe unidirectional. It doesn't offer us a lot of dynamic movement. There's not a lot of things you can do with it because it's very predictable. And so traditional music theory has it that we tend to use similar motion, which is what we're going to explain and work with in our next music theory video.